Hey, I'm Aaron. And those previous clips you just watched were recorded on a hike I did in an area called the Dark Divide, which is this 76,000 acre stretch of wilderness located in southwest Washington. Now, if you've seen my previous video on Washington's public lands, located right here, then you'll remember that wilderness areas are a really special designation of public land that are federally protected from all forms of human development. But the Dark Divide is a little bit different because it's not technically a wilderness area. It's instead classified as a roadless area. And right now it's under threat, so let's talk about that. Now, roadless areas are a really unique designation of public land. But simply put, they're areas of national forests that are prohibited from any sort of logging or road construction. There are over 58 million acres of roadless areas in the United States, mostly located in Alaska and the western contiguous half of the country. And they differ from wilderness areas because they're not protected by an act of Congress. Instead, they're established by the National Forest Roadless Area Conservation Policy, which is an executive policy that was established in 2001 by President Bill Clinton. Since then, the roadless rule has been a huge success. I can't overstate that enough. It's protected wildlife habitats, safeguarded outdoor recreation access, and it's been crucial in the storing of carbon emissions through its preservation of old-growth forest. Not everyone is a fan of the roadless rule, though. In fact, it's been under attack from the very beginning, as it effectively closed off millions of acres of public land from resource harvesting and development. These industries have spent millions of dollars over the past 25 years trying to get it overturned in court, with courts siding on the legality of the roadless rule every single time. But the problem is that this is an agency policy, not federal law. So with the right president in office, the roadless rule could be repealed, and all of these lands would be vulnerable to extraction once again. And that's what's happening right now. On June 23rd, the U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary announced plans to repeal the roadless rule, with the excuse that doing so will better help the Forest Service manage wildfires. But the facts don't really add up. While roads might help firefighters access wildfires and act as fire breaks, they also tend to increase the risk of wildfires starting in the first place. Think about it. More roads equal more people who tend to flick cigarette butts out their window or leave campfires unattended. And clearing out forest cover leads to the growth of invasive species like cheatgrass that acts as a fuel for all these fires. In fact, the majority of wildfires, and the most severe ones at that, tend to start on private property, not public. You might think that the fires in these areas would be more severe because, after all, there's way more plant growth and fuel for fire than in areas that have been pretty heavily logged. But you'd be surprised. In fact, studies show that there's no real connection between wildfire severity and if an area is roadless or not. Now, I should note that the wildfires in roadless areas do tend to grow bigger in area, but because these places aren't as heavily developed, there's a much lower risk of harm to people and property. And it's important to remember, too, that fire isn't always a bad thing. For several of these areas, it's a natural phenomenon that's shaped the way the ecosystem's developed. If the government was serious about wildfire prevention, then they wouldn't actively be cutting Forest Service funding and personnel. So if fire prevention isn't the real excuse, then why bother repealing the roadless rule at all? Well, it's simple, because this is what the timber industry wants. To them, our national forests are just a commodity waiting to be harvested. And without a roadless rule keeping them in check, it's only a matter of time before your favorite forests are clear-cut and sold off. Now, I'm sorry to sound so doom and gloom about everything, but there's some good news here. We can fight this. Currently, there's two big actions you can take right now to protect our roadless areas. First off, the U.S. Forest Service has opened a public comment period until September 19th to leave our comments in support of the roadless rule. Now, unfortunately, these public comments aren't really legally binding to the administration, but it's still really important that we make our voices heard, even if this administration proceeds with killing the roadless rule. Honestly, though, I'd like something a little more permanent than a federal policy that relies on the whims of a presidential administration. Thankfully, there's a bill moving through Congress right now that would federally enshrine the roadless rule into law. We need everyone that cares about these lands to voice their support of this bill to their local representatives. After all, the public land sell-off was stripped from the budget reconciliation bill because of public outcry. So we did it once, we can save these lands again. And this isn't a partisan issue either. These lands belong to every American, from hunters to fishers, backpackers, hikers, campers, you name it. These lands belong to everyone that loves the outdoors. So let's cherish these areas. Leave a public comment and contact your representatives at the links in the description below. And don't forget to go outside today. Thanks for watching. I'm your nature friend Aaron, and I'll see you next time.